Oh, this is going to be a good one. Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology, and first daily Mormon history podcast. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to continue our conversation with theologian Janice Allred, an associate of the September 6th. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about what life was like both during her probation and her excommunication. How has her ward treated her? We'll also talk about her work on the Mormon Alliance, and also talk about whether she's talked to people like Kate Kelly, John Dehlin, and Denver Snuffer about getting excommunicated. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out.
But the second one came in terms of all of the back and forth that we went through in a year and a half, 2. It was a long time.
The second one, you mean the second meeting?
The second article I did.
Oh, the second article. Okay.
Which I challenged the idea that
that
the Lord will not allow the prophet to lead the church astray. A very important article too. It's both of these articles are in a book collection of essays. If anyone wants to read them, collection of essays published by Signature in 1997, called "God the Mother" and Other Theological Essays. So.
Okay.
But interestingly enough, although these things are presented as teaching false doctrine, heresy, quickly they devolve into a question of obedience to authorities or not. And that was the fundamental question.
Isn't apostasy, because I know apostasy is generally the charge that they excommunicate almost all intellectuals for.
Yeah.
Shouldn't it just be, what's the word? I said this to Paul, and I was like, basically, aren't you just subverting authority? Isn't that what really it is? And they just call it apostasy?
They do call it apostasy, but usually it starts out...
Insubordination.
Usually it starts out with some kind of idea, an article or teaching, something like that. It usually starts that way. But it can come, then it will quickly change into, like with me, you're not allowed to publish this. It's not, this is what's wrong with your article. This is why it goes against, church teachings, whatever. It's, we told you not to publish it. You disobeyed, therefore you deserve to be punished.
Right.
Now, I did a very extensive defense in my first court, and in my second court as well. But I show that there is no church law against disobeying church authorities. People do this all the time. Does everyone follow the directives given to them by their bishops or stake presidents? No. Usually you're not excommunicated for that. I mean, I pointed this one out, which to me was very humorous. When I came back from Mexico, I was asked to work in the ward nursery, which I was glad to do. And the bishop who called me to this was so grateful. He said to me, "You are the 17th person we asked, and you are the first one who would accept this."
Oh, wow.
Now, so I'm this disobedient person who will not do what the bishop asked, but I accepted a call to the church nursery, but then they're going to punish me because I refused to obey an order to not publish my article when the stake president has no authority to give me such an order, and I have no obligation to obey such an order. Now, that's how wrong it is.
Yeah.
So yes, I was always willing to be an obedient member of the ward and church, but not against my conscience.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it came down to, and this was put to me very forcefully in my first court. Is it more important? So
this is 94, your first court?
Yeah.
This is when they put you on formal probation.
Right.
Which means, because you're still serving in this in the...
nursery.
Nursery?
No.
Oh, they released you?
They released me.
Oh.
Which was...
So on probation, you can't hold callings? I guess
you could do anything. This was one of the things that was unfair. They did everything to me which a person on disfellowshipment has, except one thing they allowed me to do, which was to sustain church authorities.
Oh. Which you weren't doing a very good job of.
Well, not according to their definition. According to my definition, I was. Yeah, but the problem is they get to define these things.
Right.
But it was, through the whole long process of going through 2 courts and all the interviews and everything I did with the bishop and stake president, they were never willing or ever wanted to talk about what was wrong with my articles. And the bishop said to me very clearly, he said, well, no, I'm not going to discuss what you wrote. He said, you know a lot more than I do. You know the scriptures better than I do. And I couldn't, I said, I'm willing to be persuaded if you can show me where I'm wrong. I can be persuaded. Do it.
Mm-hmm.
No, he wouldn't do it. He knew he couldn't.
Was that a surprise to you that he admitted, hey,
No, I
you're
knew
way
that.
above me?
And in fact, I had never insisted that they do that because to me, that was not the question. I was not trying to convince them. They didn't have to read my articles. They would have never known about them if the church hadn't brought them to their attention.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, you're released from the nursery.
Yes.
To show we mean business. You can still come to church. Were you able to take the sacrament, or did they?
No, I couldn't do anything.
You couldn't take the sacrament. Okay.
No, everything was forbidden to me, except one thing, which was interesting: making comments in Sunday school.
You could make comments.
I was allowed to. Now, some bishops will not allow a person on disfellowshipped or to do that, but my bishop always did, which was interesting to me.
Okay.
He didn't tell me this. This came out later, because the Sunday school teacher at this time was actually very kind, and he said to me, "The comments you make are really good, and feel free." So I did, but then the bishop told me someone had complained, and the bishop said to me, and I told that person that I have given you permission.
Oh, okay.
And I thought, I didn't know I had permission from you, but I'm glad I do. So yeah, that's it.
So can you still make comments in Sunday school?
Yeah, I still do.
Oh, good.
30 years
So
later.
even after you've been excommunicated, they don't take that away from you?
Well, here's an interesting thing. There's a difference between an excommunicated person and a non-member. An excommunicated person has fewer privileges than a non-member.
Yeah, because we can actually, I don't know that we do this anymore, but when we had scouts, you could call a non-member to be a scout leader.
Yeah.
Which you couldn't do, obviously.
A non-member could take the sacrament if they wanted to.
Well, technically, we have closed communion, right? They're not supposed to. We don't enforce it.
No, they're not supposed to. I mean, the scriptural statements against it are very clear that if the leaders know that a person is unworthy to take the sacrament, they should not allow that person to take the sacrament.
Okay.
And that's from Jesus himself. It's in the Book of Mormon.
Well, and I know Levina has made a joke about when she's sitting on the side and the deacons are like trying to pass it around her, and she'll just grab the tray and pass it over.
We're allowed to pass the tray. When I go to wards where they don't know me, I take the sacrament.
Oh.
Because I believe I'm worthy, and because this bishop has no authority over me.
Would you get in trouble in your home ward for doing that?
I have no idea. It might be okay, but I'm respectful of the authority of the bishop in my ward.
Mm-hmm.
He could, I believe, say to me, "Janice, you can take the sacrament." And I would appreciate that. In fact, I wish he would. In fact, I've thought of asking
Should we send this to him?
Well, I've thought of asking him, but then this thought occurs to me. If I ask him and he refuses, then he will be under greater condemnation than he already is.
So better to ask, don't tell.
So
right?
I won't ask because I don't want to. I don't want to
put him in a tough position.
Put him in a tough position, right?
Yeah.
So I'm respectful of, and I always told that to the bishop. I said, "Look, the views that you condemn as heretical, I have held for many years. I know the proper forums in which I can express them. Church, the ward, Sunday school, that is not the proper forum, and I would never do that. But they didn't respect that. And yes, I've continued, and there's never been any, as far as I know, there's never been any problem with the things that I have shared.
At least at church.
At church.
You don't talk about the Godhead.
No, of course not. It takes, you cannot discuss these things in a casual, offhand way.
Right.
You have to lay the ground and be respectful of where your audience is in order to do it. And I would never do that.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had any desire to disturb someone's testimony of God or the church. My only hope is to help people better understand Jesus Christ and the gospel. That's all I've ever wanted to do. If a person has questions, I'm really happy to give some answers.
That's why we're here.
Exactly. If they don't, it's fine with me.
All right. So 94 comes, you get put on probation. What happens next?
Now, this was a really interesting thing because I was prepared to be excommunicated then, but I believe that because of all of the publicity, the church did not want to look bad. And so they put me on formal probation. But to me, it was a kind of, holding the sword over my head. Because basically, I had told them very clearly that I intended to publish these. So the one on God the Mother had already been published. The other one, I intended to publish it again if somebody wanted to publish it. And I intended to keep writing about topics that were important to me in the gospel and, all of these things. But the bishop put out, he gave me a list of conditions that I had to follow. And I don't remember them exactly. He never gave me a written list. So I just had to remember them. But what I remember is it strictly limited my ability to speak and write freely. And I told them very clearly that I would not accept that. So I actually wrote what I called an open letter to Bishop Hammond, which I gave to the press because it was all out there. And he was very indignant with me for sharing these sacred proceedings of the council. I said, okay, I understand that you are required to keep them confidential, but this is my court. I can make it as public as I want to. That's how, client lawyer privilege goes. That's how client therapist privilege goes. That's how privilege goes. The person who is the client can speak openly. And I said to them, and I give you my permission, you can speak. They wouldn't, of course. So I made this, I said, this is how I stand in relation to the conditions you gave me. I will follow all the ones that you have the authority to impose, as in, I will not partake of the sacrament. I will behave in a seemly manner at church. And I was very insulted that he would imply that I wouldn't. It was just went against what he knew about me, what is true of me. I wouldn't do that. But I said, I am not willing to have my writing and publishing and speaking overseen by you. So it was clear. So basically, between the two courts, it was the bishop waiting to get enough evidence that I had broken the conditions so that he then could excommunicate me. It was, keep these conditions or you will be excommunicated. And my position was, you have no authority to make these conditions. So I will not follow the things that you have no authority to exercise over me. So then, that was in October, and in the May of the next year, I was excommunicated.
So October of 94, you're put on probation. May of 95, you're excommunicated because you didn't follow the rules.
Right.
Did you publish another article or?
I gave several speeches.
Okay.
And I think it was mostly for that. Again, I'd have to go back and look.
Because you weren't supposed to speak publicly without the bishop's permission.
I had given a speech. So the Mormon Women's Forum had a conference each year, which is called Counterpoint Conference. And at Counterpoint Conference, they asked, and of course I was one of the organizers of it, but I was asked to give an account of my church discipline up to that point. So I did that, and it was published in one of the, we had a journal at that time, it was published there. My bishop this became a huge issue. My bishop wanted a copy of that speech so he could decide whether I had broken the rules or not. And I said, I'm not going to give you a copy of it. If you wanted to, you could have come and heard it. It was published, and then I actually gave it twice.
Plus, he was getting everything off the slide
yeah, exactly.
anyway.
I said, and he was very upset about that. But to me, that was, he had no right to coerce me into,
So did they have spies at this?
Yeah, I think they do.
Okay.
Plus, my speaking to the press.
Because it was a public event, so anybody could come, whether you're a member of the Mormon Women's Alliance or not.
It was public. And also, I gave the same speech to another group, a Provo group. I can't remember who they were. And I think that's the one he heard about because that was publicized in the the Daily Herald.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, I gave a lot of interviews, and that was part of what they had against me, giving all of these interviews to.
So no interviews without church clearance.
Exactly. And what had I done? So I really hadn't given that many papers since, there was not that much time between them, October and May. Again, life is busy for me. I don't have that much time to write. It was really a lot of work to do. I was writing my account for the case reports, which took, I was working on that one.
So the Mormon Alliance, this was something that you and Levina did together.
Yeah, the Mormon.
How long did that organization last? Because it's not really around anymore, is it?
No. And again, it's okay. I think it started in '92 when my youngest was. It may have been before.
And you were documenting. I know what Levina said, I think, was ecclesiastical abuse.
Exactly.
Basically, where a leader would punish an intellectual for the most part.
No, all of our case reports were not intellectuals. There were other cases as well. So the Mormon Alliance was actually organized. The idea came from Paul Toscano and Fred Voros. And then Margaret was one of the founders, and Levina came in, and I did, and who else? Several of us, and that's what we did at first. We had quite a few different meetings, and then Levina and I started working on the case reports together, and we had done, our first one was in I think our first one wasn't published until 1995, which was the year I was excommunicated. It was on child sexual abuse.
Oh, so it did engage sexual abuse as well. Okay.
Yeah. And that's where I started doing.
Is that where the leaders were doing it? Like, was this Boy Scouts or other stuff as well?
Other stuff. We had a lot of information, a lot of cases. And that was, we were working on it, but it didn't come out till later. So my work with the Mormon Women's Forum and the Mormon Alliance and my presentations at Sunstone had not really been an issue in the first court. It was just the papers. The second court, my bishop was bringing up all these other things as well.
Okay. Why do you think that is? Just needed more evidence?
I think he was getting all this information from the church about my different insubordinate activities, I guess. But he had a very skewed perspective on what the purpose of all these different things were. He saw me as being involved with groups that were trying to bring the church down, which was totally absurd. Wrong, of course. But I didn't get it at the time. I didn't see why he saw me as such a dangerous person.
Have you ever, because it seems like around 2015 or so, Kate Kelly, John Dehlin, I think Denver Snuffer, they were all excommunicated around that time. I think there were a few others, a few maybe lesser known people. Norman, I can't remember what his name was, but have any of those people come to you with, hey, do you have any advice for me to handle the situation, or do you have any insight into that?
No, they haven't come to me, but of course I've been interested. My perception is each of those people that you mentioned were gathering followings. And that is what the church does not want. I mean, I think that's one reason why they went after Avraham Gileadi, because he had big followings who would come to his lectures.
Oh.
And I think they saw Paul as a charismatic person who was gathering followings. Paul has never had any interest in gathering a following. In fact, he's he will push people away. But, Kate Kelly, she was the head of Ordained Women. Mm-hmm. John Dehlin had his
Mormon Stories.
And Snuffer, of course, had a big group.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that as the common factor as why.
Well, Denver, he's a former guest. He didn't really start his following until after he got excommunicated.
Oh, really? Oh, really? That's interesting. No, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Because he really wanted to stay in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny you hear some similar things. Well, tell me what I said wrong. Because he had written a book or two that got him in hot water. But he didn't really start until after he was excommunicated.
Did he have? But was he doing podcasts or anything that was?
Well, his big.
What was he doing?
The reason why he got excommunicated was a book called "Passing the Heavenly Gift."
So it was a publication.
Yeah. It's funny because he had another one called The Second Comforter, which was actually sold at Deseret Book, which in some ways, in my mind, the church didn't really have a problem at the time, but he was advocating, you can see Jesus, he can visit you, he has visited me, and those sort of things, and that was fine. But in Passing the Heavenly Gift, I think personally, this is kind of my opinion, he had said some things and it was viewed as denigrating church leaders, especially Heber J. Grant. His response was, I was just quoting what Heber J. Grant said in his journal. Like, why is that wrong? But if you read the book, a case can be made that he was denigrating Heber J. Grant specifically. And once again, he wasn't following counsel. And so there's some similarities, but it was really after the church excommunicated him, he kind of excommunicated the church and was like, okay. But he's kind of a libertarian in that he doesn't really want to be the leader. In fact, he hates to be called a prophet, even though he fits the definition of a prophet. But he's like that. There's too much with that word, too much baggage with that word. And he doesn't really want to be the leader. It's kind of a libertarian, hey, here's my recipe book, The Second Comforter. You too can get a visit with Jesus and see angels and that sort of a thing if you follow this recipe, basically. But go do your own thing. I'm not the leader. So it's kind of funny. I mean, he really is the leader, but he doesn't claim to be the leader.
What you say brings up something which I think is actually crucial here,
okay.
Which is these people are pointing in different ways. They are taking people away from the authority of the church. As in, he's saying, you do not need the church to access God, to see Jesus. You can do this yourself. And I remember another case that the Mormon Alliance case reports dealt with, which was, I think his name was George Pace.
Yeah.
A teacher at BYU, a religion teacher. Who
Very similar to Denver.
Yeah, very similar. He was teaching people to have prayer, to get closer to Christ. And he was disciplined for that.
Right.
And
Denver wasn't. It was don't talk bad about Heber J. Grant.
But that is another point that comes in, and that came in with me too, because in some of the things I was saying, I was not deliberately saying, Hinckley is wrong here, but I was questioning him in both ones.
And they were reading between the lines.
Oh, yes. No, they don't want you to question. They don't want you to do anything that will diminish their authority, whether it's pointing people to other ways to connect with Christ and spirituality, or whether it's criticizing anything that any of them said or disobeying anything that will call their authority into question. That is what they will go after. That's my view.
Well, and I wonder if that's why, because Maxine has come back into the church.
Right.
But Lavina was denied.
Right.
And is it because of the drawing attention to ecclesiastical abuse, whether that's sexual abuse or disciplining church intellectuals or that sort of a thing, that it almost seems to me, tell me if you agree or disagree, that's kind of an unforgivable sin. Yeah. Don't point out our flaws.
Yeah, I think so. And again, it's sad because, like with Lavina, they didn't tell her why.
Right.
Or they didn't say, apply again in 2 years. They just said, no, we don't accept it, which is very sad because, Lavina is a woman of very strong character, has strong belief in Christ, and wanted to be rebaptized. Has never done anything slightly unethical or questionable.
Yeah.
And she has not written that much either. She's an editor.
Right. Yeah, but just the association with the Mormon Alliance.
It could have been the Mormon Alliance. It could be our case reports that I don't know because they don't tell.
Because Maxine wasn't really affiliated with that.
No, Maxine.
I mean, Michael Quinn wasn't either. He's passed away now. So obviously,
I don't think Michael decided. From what was read at the symposium, I believe that although he was excommunicated for his scholarly writings, I believe that because of his homosexuality, he felt that he couldn't challenge things and couldn't stay.
Yeah.
I feel that. I mean, I don't know.
I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
It makes sense to me from what was read from his memoir at the symposium.
Yeah. And that's coming out, I think, in September.
Yeah.
In fact, it may be out when
I think that the symposium audio, or I think it might be available right now from what was at the symposium.
I'll check it out.
But the book, which was written by the scholar, is going to come out in September, I think. And I think Michael's memoir is coming out in September, too. I'm not sure.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with theologian Janice Allred. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about how the Scarlet Letter of Apostasy has affected Janice and her children.
The part that is hardest for me is that most of my children, as far as I understand, don't even believe in God anymore.
Oh.
That's the hardest for me.
Okay.
And not because that makes them not lesser people or not as good, but to me, belief in God gives such comfort and also such understanding that it's hard for me to understand how we can live in this world with meaning.
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, subscribe on either Patreon or at gospeltangents.com. For just $5 a month, you can hear the entire audio uninterrupted. On our $10 tier, if you would like to see the whole video, you can see that either on youtube.com/gospeltangents, or I've got a special Facebook group devoted for full videos. So subscribe at gospeltangents.com and sign up for just $10 a month. For $20 a month, if you'd like to get some bonus content, maybe some of the stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor, you can sign up for that. And then if you'd like to talk to me for $100 a month, we'll do a monthly phone call on something like Zoom, and you can ask me anything you want. So thanks again. Also, don't forget about the merch, mugs, t-shirts, hats, things like that. I'm trying to get the ties up there. Hopefully I can get up there. And thanks again for watching Gospel Tangents, and click here for some more videos.